Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my new podcast. And today I'm quite excited because I have a very special guest with me. His name is Dr. David Lee, and I'm gonna read this with the help of my little friend to not miss anything. So Dr. David Lee has a doctorate in clinical psychology and extensive experience in this field. He has also struggled with alcohol addiction, and now being through that experience himself, he's helping others get sober and live a fulfilling alcohol-free life by being a certified addictions recovery coach. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Ben. Pleasure. Great to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Anytime.
I think today you will be able to share a lot of good insights from your own experience, but also from your professional background when it comes to addiction. So I thought it would be great to actually start the podcast by quickly summarizing your life story and also how your own addiction played part of it.
Sure. Well, first of all, alcoholism, addiction was very much a part of my life from an early age, in the sense that I grew up in a family where alcohol dependence was such an issue. My dad was alcoholic.
Okay.
On my mom's side of the family, extended family, lots of alcohol-related problems, So very familiar to me. And the culture in which I grew up in the UK, I grew up in Manchester, in a very working-class part of Manchester. Everything seemed to revolve around drinking,
Yeah.
There's the real pub culture and real sort of gritty sort of working class culture. So alcohol was very, very prevalent, But the pain of alcoholism, or what went with that, I tasted that very early on, as a child, when I saw that this is not necessarily good. That said, alcohol was so freely available that I could drink at a very young age.
Yeah.
And I sometimes joke to people, and I say, in terms of my own story, I say that, I had a wonderful 14 years of sobriety between 1978 and 1992, okay? And I got to the age of 14, and it got a hold of me, right? And so those first 14 years were not a problem. And then the next sort of 27 years were a problem.
Yeah.
But when I first tasted, it wasn't when I first tasted alcohol, when I was first able to properly taste alcohol, and it was available to me, that was where the problem began, because I could drink and I had access to it, and I could buy alcohol, or I had friends that could buy alcohol, right? Because they looked older than me.
Yeah.
And this is very much there. It was difficult childhood in many ways, pretty lonely childhood, having an alcoholic father, and just difficult sort of experiences, difficult, I was like an only child. I had older brothers, but much older.
Yeah.
So I grew up like an only child. So I was this very lonely, introspective, but pretty bright child, and also pretty driven, especially in my teenage years. I did sport to a very high level. I did taekwondo, martial arts, to a pretty elite level, And I had intellect as well. I was pretty bright. I was mainly quite artistic, but I relatively good at the sciences and the math as well, and then found myself going into psychology, which I never envisaged, but then went down that road. Probably, as most psychologists and therapists tend to say and tell the story, that I probably was born out of my own, subconscious attempt to understand myself and what I'd been through, my own childhood, and to understand people, and to make some sense of, probably my dad and his struggles, and wider family struggles as well. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the sort of personal side of things.
Yeah, interesting. And I didn't know that you're actually from Manchester.
Yeah.
Just as a side note, I'm a huge fan of Oasis.
Right.
Band from Manchester. And
Yeah.
I remember following them I mean, these guys were full-blown alcoholics as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just the pop culture, you know.
I'm a huge music fan and a big advocate for the Manchester scene as well,
Yeah.
sort of wider scene. So yeah, music plays a big part of my life. Sorry, I was preempting the question about football teams there.
Yeah.
So we'll clear that one. I'm a Red. I'm a Man United fan for my sins. But yeah, I'm very proud of where I'm from. I'm proud of Manchester, although my upbringing was pretty difficult in many ways. My childhood. I'm really proud to be from Manchester because it's actually it's a great city and it's home to so much talent, music, innovation, industry. Also in terms of what we developed, the Industrial Revolution, and all of the technological advances that are born out of that great city, and the music scene, of course.
Yeah. So you mentioned, obviously, you started drinking at age 14. Of course, having an alcoholic father, but then also being in this social environment of Manchester, UK, which we all know it's a big, big drinking culture. So, of course, from the get-go, you were on the path of drinking quite a lot. How did your drinking progress throughout the years of studying psychology, right? And then also later when starting to work, what was the progress there?
Yeah. Well, like I say, at the age of 14, it was readily available to me. I could get access to it, the legal drinking age in the UK is 18. I think that's still the case. I didn't look 18 when I was 14, but I had friends who did, so I could easily get it. And if I'm completely honest with you, it wasn't really an issue in the home. I could just go to the fridge and grab a beer or something, or wasn't frowned upon. It was there. And I used to go to the pub drinking with mum and dad at times, and then so it wasn't like I was stopped and like. But I found it at 14. That's the reality is I'd had alcohol before that. Yeah, but that's when it was readily available to me and I had access, and it became a weekend thing. And throughout my teens, I realized it was a problem because I think I became more and more dependent. Now, my take on that is I think there's something there, whether it's socially, growing up in a family where alcoholism is an issue, or whether there's something sort of genetic that. But I believe, and this is sort of the way I've come to look at it, is that I had we sometimes talk about the allergy, if you like, the allergy to alcoholism, where the first drink isn't enough. It's not going to be enough, right?
Yeah.
To carry on drinking. That became more apparent throughout my teenage years, because I remember that, for example, I would go out with my friends in the week. I think I remember being about 16 or something, and just hanging out with my friends one night during the week, right after studies and everything. And going to the shop and actually buying some beer, it might have been like a 4-pack of beer or something. And they were like, "Dave, what are you doing?" And it's not weekend. It's not a Saturday night where we have fun. I'm like, "What does it matter?" And they're like, "Why are you having a drink now?" Like, and they were like, just once a week we would go out and drink the strong lager or cider or beer, whatever we were drinking, and the other stuff that we grew up drinking, the cheap, horrible wine and stuff that we used to drink, right? Fortified wine. But I was having a few beers in the week, at like 16 or something, and we were just hanging out on the streets, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I remember that because they were so surprised, And I realized then I wasn't just a binge drinker. It was pretty consistent for me. It was getting into my bloodstream every day, pretty much from then. And I remember like being pretty fit, right? Because I did taekwondo to quite a high level, but I was still drinking consistently. I competed at a high level, but I was still drinking a lot. Then I got into the gym. I'd work out. I got on the weights, and I got in. I went through that kind of whole phase where I was in the gym a lot. But I always remember, I'd do my heavy workout in the gym, and I'd be on my way home thinking, right, I need to eat before I get to bed. But actually, I'll just stop off and get some beers as well. So, all of those calories I burnt off were going back on again.
Yeah.
And then, as I went through my studies, I went on to study my bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree. But I was drinking pretty consistently. It was part of the culture, right? But well, drinking was part of the culture, or going out drinking in bars and drinking in clubs, nightclubs, and all that kind of stuff. But that consistent drinking, I don't think that wasn't everyone that was doing that, right?
Yeah.
But that was me. So I became pretty dependent on it, and such was you know, the course of things, really, the trajectory. My dad passed away when I was 23. He was only 51, sadly. So, you know, his health was failing, and sudden heart attack when he was 51. And I remember that it was tragic. You know, it was tragic. You know, I mean, he never took heed of the warning signs that his drinking was going to kill him. And, you know, whether you say it was that or it wasn't, right? 51 is a tragically young age to die from a heart attack, and having lived what I remember of him, I didn't really know him, I'll be honest with you. I never really got to know him.
Yeah.
We had a really strange relationship, but what I remember of him, he was always stressed and preoccupied and anxious, craving that next drink, and just struggling to live life on life's terms, you know, struggling to deal with the things that we all deal with in life, paying bills, paying the mortgage, you know, just handling life. It just seemed like such an uphill struggle for him. And what I realized in hindsight as well is that he was also a gambling addict as well. He wasn't gambling. Yeah. I mean, he was gambling in the pub during his drinking, because he used to play on these fruit machines, these slot machines. But he must have blown so much money on that over the years. But it was only really as I got to understand a lot more about addiction and gone through the lived experience myself of recovery from alcoholism and addiction, I've come to understand that, he was a gambling addict as well. He may not have been gambling high stakes and things, but he was consistently putting a lot of money away, you know, when you look at that. And I think that was all the short-term gratification of just taking that drink and hoping for a big win or whatever. But life always seemed really, really difficult for him. It was always like a struggle. And I think I learned that from a young age, that life's tough, you know.
Yeah.
Life's really tough. It felt like a grind. But actually, you know, this chemical that I can just pour down my throat, it's gonna take the edge off things.
Yeah.
And it did. It did. But it also had disastrous consequences, because as I became more and more dependent, it led to more and more problems. And I don't believe it was just the alcohol, because I distinguish between alcohol and alcoholism. You know, a lot of people are kind of waging this war against alcohol. You know, they're out there talking about alcohol's bad and we should ban alcohol and we should always. That's not the war I'm waging. The war I'm waging, if anything, I want to help people who are struggling with addiction. I want to help people who are struggling with alcoholism. I want to help the families that suffer as a consequence of alcoholism and addiction. Because I grew up in an alcoholic family. You know, I was the child of an alcoholic parent. I have been myself an alcoholic parent. You know, I have a son who's now a teenager. Yeah. And for a time before I got into recovery myself, I was on course for making all of those mistakes that my dad had made.
Yeah. So would you say that you were, until the time that you actually were able to recover and stop drinking, would you say you were following the same pattern as your dad did?
I don't think it was quite like that, because I think for one, we're very different people. Okay. I think, whilst you could say, you know, the whole nature nurture thing, of course there are similarities in there, but I think I was a very different person. You know, for a start, I believe my dad was quite rigid, quite closed-minded, quite a shy, introspective kind of guy. I mean, I had a lot of that. I was lonely, I was introspective when I was young, but I sort of came out of my shell a bit more as I got older. So I had a bit more confidence, if you like, and you know, I went on to study psychology. I was more, you know, he was more of a sort of an industry kind of, you know, scientist, kind of engineer type guy, very sort of working class. You learn a trade and this is what you do. He left school. He was working in the same company, you know, for like 30 odd years or something. I went through the academic route. I was much more artistic. I was much more curious about learning about you know, the way we work as humans, and reading books and just fascinated in the way that humans operate and the way that relationships. So what I'm saying is we're very, very different people. What I believe is the commonality there is that I was very neglectful of my son. I think whilst I had a relationship with him, I wasn't able to be present, because when I wasn't drinking, I was restless and I wanted to take that drink. When I was drinking, I I was drunk. You know what happens
Yeah.
when you're an alcoholic and you drink so much, and you're parenting, you're trying to be there. You inevitably you're not going to do as good a job as you could do if you're sober,
Yeah.
connected to the present moment, able to listen. You know, I was always caught up in stress or the next thing or the next worry, the next challenge, or caught up in self, which is so common among addicts and alcoholics. You know,
Yeah.
self-centered to the core.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that until my life and my drinking had got to such a point where I knew I needed to do something about it. You know? So yeah, I regret a lot of stuff in terms of my early relationship with my son, because I could have been a better dad. You know, became a dad in my late 20s for the first time. But thankfully, I got to the point where I realized something needed to be done.
So that moment when you realized that this thing has to stop, was that one really special event that made you rethink about your whole life, or was there like a series of events that happened that led you to the decision that, okay, it's time for me to quit drinking for good?
What actually happened, I mean, I'd gone years, you know, drinking and convincing myself that I was just a regular drinker, right? No, I think the word alcoholic floated around in my mind, and I sort of dismissed it. And because I work in mental health, because I'm a clinical psychologist, and because I work with people with addiction and all sorts of problems, right? I convinced myself that I can control this some way, somehow, right? And that puts you at a distance from the problem, because you can help other people with their life problems. You think you can in some way then apply that to yourself, and it won't be a problem. When it got to the stage where I knew I needed help, and I knew that things needed to change, was when I hit my rock bottom. So I'd got to the point where I was broken. You know, I was broken. I was broke. I was out of work at that time. My marriage had broken down. That was here in Dubai. That was 3 years after I'd moved to Dubai. Things got gradually worse. Life became more and more unmanageable without that drink or the steady flow of alcohol, right? And it was more of a how did I get here moment? How did it get to this? I'd left the family home. I'd effectively been kicked out. I realized I had very little money, and my life was a mess. And then for a time, I was separated from my son, like not by choice. I stayed living and working here in Dubai, and he moved back to the UK. So not by choice, I lived without my son. Didn't have contact with him for a time. Couldn't, you know, and it was really difficult. I mean, there were a whole series of things where my life came crashing down, you know, decisions that I made, and mistakes that I made, and things that I did that I'm not proud of within my marriage, and that were inappropriate, you know, that my judgment was so impaired. It was almost like, you know, you can live so long in an alcoholic sense, drinking like that, but then my sense is it's not just the alcohol, it's living with a condition or a disease, if you like, alcoholism, that if it gradually becomes worse, then as the drinking becomes worse, you become more and more sick. You start making those really ill-informed decisions in your life and doing things that no sane person would do. You justify to yourself that, it's a good idea to do this, it's a good idea to do that, and then you hide things, you lie about things, you know, you lie, you cheat, you hide things, and that's what my life became. And all of that stuff is like it builds up. It's like sweeping all of that debris under the carpet that eventually builds up and has to be dealt with. The financial mistakes, you know, the lies that I told in my marriage at the time, and all of the things I'd said to people over the years, and people that I'd offended and upset and all of that. And I didn't know any better. And I don't say that as justification.
Yeah.
I believe that I was really, really sick for a long time and just downplayed it.
Yeah.
Because I had my professional side, my persona that could go away and do the work and hide the fact that I was struggling so much and so dependent on alcohol. And then I would come home and it was so clear that I was struggling. You know, if you were a fly on the wall and able to watch me, you'd see what a mess it was.
Yeah. And, you know, when I hear your story and also think about my past mistakes and all the shit that I've done, I still do think that, you know, looking back, even though I almost do not recognize this person, I feel like I was trying to be still the best version of myself. But now comparing it to who I am right now, it just seems so far away.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you agree that we all try to be the best version of ourselves all the time, but it's so complicated sometimes?
Well, we don't know what we don't know, do we? That's the thing. So at any one time, we think the way that we are behaving and the way that we are living life, we think is the right way.
Yeah.
I mean, you only have to look back on yourself at certain periods of your life. You know, if you could look back on yourself, say as, you know, 14-year-old Ben, or maybe as 19-year-old Ben or whatever, and look at some of the things you were saying to people and some of the, you know, I often laugh because I sometimes I'm able to see things that I put on social media many years ago, and it really makes me cringe because it's like, I mean, not just the photos of pints of beer that I used to put on there to show everybody that I'm out drinking again, you know, and the wonderful life I'm living to bury all of this pain, but just some of the things that I said, some of the things I thought would get attention and would, and that's what I did. I overcompensated, you know, I overcompensated because I couldn't be a certain way when I was sober without the drink. So the more I had to drink, and I would say things to people, I would try and get a joke, get a laugh out of people and joke around and things. And that's you could say, well, it's just trying to be fun, right? That's trying to be your best version. Yeah. If we boil it down, really, what we're looking for, most of us, is connection, aren't we? We're looking for human connection in some way. And, you know, maybe at times I was going about that in a certain way. Maybe it was working, you know, and at a certain time, certain group of people, oh, Dave's funny, he's a laugh, he's on form tonight, you know. And then at other times, he said something that's really offended me, you know, or he's insulted my wife or something, you know, my girlfriend. I think we're always trying to connect, aren't we? We're always trying to look for connect, and that's the problem. I think that's the problem, because I think, you know, I come across this a lot, you know, the notion that addiction is kind of the antithesis of connection. You know, we're often, when we're addicted or alcoholic, we're isolated. Yeah. Or we feel isolated. And that was certainly the case for me. There was always this hole inside. There was always this well of emptiness that I felt, and I was looking for connection. And that's what it was about. You know, for me, that was it. The alcoholism was my gateway addiction. I had other addictive tendencies as well. You know, I was very codependent in relationships as well. But the drinking was, it manifests through the drinking, really, if you like. But yeah, I think the intent there was just to connect with people and have people like me so I could feel good about myself. Because the reality is, when I look at it, I grew up in an environment that didn't enable me to just feel accepted and comfortable in myself. And I grew up trying to connect with people in the wrong ways, you know, because fundamentally we need other people to survive, don't we? We need people to get by, to help us out. But I always struggled to ask people for help, or struggled to ask people to let people in, you know. That's I was a child of an alcoholic, parent and grew up in an environment where I didn't feel safe to ask for help or to connect genuinely. Yeah, I think we're always looking for that.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah, and looking for connection through addiction, but then I can
Right.
totally relate to your story that
Right.
while I was in the biggest midst of my addiction, I was so lonely and I felt so lonely.
Yeah.
Even though I had friends and family,
sure.
but
Yeah,
like inside, I was just rotting out.
Yeah. Well, there's a disparity there, isn't there, between
Yeah.
what people see from the outside and what you
Exactly.
feel inside. So
Yeah.
if you could say, look at you through the lens of a camera, you might see vibrant Ben who's happy and joking,
Exactly,
having
yeah.
fun and knocking back the shots or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But actually inside, you don't feel like that. Or whilst you're drinking, you're trying to you're trying to numb those feelings.
Yeah.
And people, you can't take that lens of a camera to look inside you. You know what it feels like.
Yeah.
You know what it feels like. Now it's only for me with the benefit of hindsight and recovery that I've been able to do the work to really know what I was feeling and what I was missing and what I was looking for, And that's regardless of being a clinical psychologist. That's regardless of learning everything that textbooks and, all of the theories and models that we have of working and different therapeutic approaches tell you. I could sit down in front of people. I technically was a very good therapist, I think, because I helped a lot of people. Try and apply that to myself. But I was going about it in the wrong way because it wasn't exploratory. It didn't allow me to really explore and develop an awareness over what was really going on for me.
So how did you actually stop drinking in the end?
Yeah, well, I hit my rock bottom. I went into therapy.
Okay.
I went back to the UK. I saw our therapist who I knew had been very helpful to a very good colleague friend of mine. And had therapy with this lady for long time. It was long-term psychotherapy, which I'd had therapy previously. And I was a therapist, but I'd had therapy myself. But I always had therapy in small doses, never long-term psychotherapy. And she said, "Do you think you're alcoholic? You have a problem with alcohol and addictions more generally?"
Yeah.
And I think at that point I was ready to hear that because my life was a mess. It had broken down. And I went into a 12-step fellowship. And that for me was the essence of my recovery. It saved my life. And that's where the spiritual side of it comes in for me, because I knew all the psychological tools, techniques, strategies, skills, if you like. And I'm not saying they are not useful, because they can be very, very useful. And they can be, if they are introduced to people in the right way. But for me, bringing in a sense of being powerless over alcohol, that was absolutely fundamental to my recovery, to the start of my recovery journey. That I'm powerless over alcohol, that my life is unmanageable. And that part, that my life is unmanageable. I'm powerless over people, places, and things as well. And right now, I have to accept where I am. I have to accept where my life is right now in order for me to do something about it. But it's not going to change by me just forcing my will on my life and trying to change it all at once. And, because I tried that for years. I tried to manipulate and augment reality and fix things and have things to be just the way I wanted them to be.
Yeah.
I always come off worse. If it was Dave versus the world and circumstances always won, right?
Yeah.
So I had to let go of the struggle. I had to learn to let go of the battle, the grind, the hustle. Doesn't mean that you can't approach things seriously and take action and have goals and work at things. But what it means is you've got to stop wrestling with what is. You've got to allow life to unfold in a way. That was the spiritual part that I brought into my life. That meant, handing my life and my will over to the care of a higher power, whether you want to call it God or, intelligence, source, pure consciousness, the universe, whatever you want to call it. For me, that was, and then that for me was about, in essence, is about the laws of nature, right? You struggle against those laws of nature. You go figure. Things don't tend to come off so well. They didn't for me. And when I opened myself up to this notion that there's not only me here that's controlling the show. In fact, I don't think I control very much of this show.
Yeah.
And that's quite possibly what's brought about this mess, that offered a new way, that offered me hope. And with hope then came faith, the idea that if I let go of the struggle and stop trying to control everything, there's a power greater than me out there that's got my back. But it hasn't got my back when I'm manipulating people or lying to people or doing bad things or, hustling and trying to get one over people. It hasn't got my back then. And that with that came a new way of living life. Not all at once. That learning, if you like, that sort of spiritual experience. So that was a major part of it, and still is for me. I have a recovery program. And just new ways, opening up to new ways, reading around things that I'd always been oblivious to or ignorant of, getting some coaching myself, then taking what I knew based on my own experience in my profession, my clinical experience, but kind of looking at that through a new lens. To apply it to myself, I had to completely look at it through a new lens, which was bringing the spiritual aspect in as well. I couldn't just do techniques on myself and change things. It had never worked. It never worked. And that's one of my issues, as somebody who's in recovery from addiction and alcoholism, and somebody who's also worked as a psychologist and, as a coach as well now, and a recovery coach as well. That's one of my issues is that there is no one therapeutic approach that can claim to have a monopoly over addiction recovery, right? Yeah. People will say that, there's approaches like cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, and or, if you like, you can use hypnotherapy or whatever it be. I honestly don't believe that any one therapeutic approach can have monopoly over addiction recovery. I believe in an integration of things, and for me, that's been a coming together of the spiritual with the psychological, with the emotional, with the behavioral.
It's a very holistic approach to it.
I think it needs to be. I think it certainly had to be for me. I've yet to meet anybody yet who's recovered successfully from addiction or from alcoholism who said that they were treated by a therapist and
boom,
nailed it. Hey, I had some CBT and I don't drink anymore or whatever. I'm very wary of people who make that claim or that they read a book and that they changed. Maybe you stopped drinking. Did you really change as a person fundamentally, or did you just put the drink down?
Maybe it's more of a short-term thing rather than like a long-term change.
Quite possibly, Ben. Yeah. And for me, the fundamental question there was, do I just want to stop drinking, or do I want to become a different person? Do I want to become a good parent? Do I want to become a good father? Do I want to, in future, have another shot at being a good husband?
Yeah.
Do I in future want to have a good shot at being a good, honest human being who lives with integrity, who doesn't shirk on his responsibilities, who doesn't walk away from things just because they get scary and life gets tough, right? That was more the issue for me. I knew I had to face life in a new way. I knew I had to show up different, not just put the drink down. Yeah, sure, that was part of it. But I had to work fundamentally at living my life based on new principles. I didn't know what those principles were at first, but I knew I had to be open to them.
Yeah. But would you say that your old addictive tendencies are still somewhere inside of you, or you feel like you've dealt with them and now you're completely free of them?
Well, transformation and growth is not about erasing the person that you have been and just becoming a new person. You know, it's... So there's several ways of answering that question. So if we look at the very neuroscientific way, we might say we never fully lose the trace of the memory of the person that you've become or the habits that you used to have, right?
Yeah.
Or the ways in which you used to think. You just develop new ones, and those new ways, new habits, new ways of thinking and new ways of feeling become more accessible to you. Yeah. And I'm inclined to believe that. Yeah. If I look at it in a more spiritual sense, then I have to work each day at allowing the light to come into my life rather than getting caught up in the darkness. I have to work at that each and every day. Can I still become consumed by things or do things to excess? Yes, absolutely, 100%, of course. Now, that's not consuming alcohol anymore. For the most part, it's not doing things that bring risk to my health, my life, or my relationships, right? Although if I do anything to extremes, it can be a risk, right? If I work to extremes, for example, there's a risk to my relationship there. There's a risk to my health because I might not get enough sleep and enough rest, right?
Yeah.
You know, in the mid-70s, a psychiatrist called William Glasser wrote a book called Positive Addiction, right?
Okay. Positive
addiction, yeah. It's not often talked about, right? But he developed a theory. He developed a therapeutic approach called reality therapy, but he also developed an approach called choice theory, which is the idea that we fundamentally, the only thing that we can control is ourselves and our behavior and what we do. We make choices in relation to how we show up, yeah. So he's famous for that, but he wrote a book kind of based around that called Positive Addiction. And the idea that actually when we make choices about what we attend to and what we become addicted to, that can be empowering, right? If there are, you know, certain things that it might be good to get addicted to, right? If you're addicted to spending time with your children and having fun with them, if you're addicted to treating your family or to having, you know, amazing conversation with your wife or your husband or your spouse, right? Great. Is that a problem to anyone? There might be certain, you know, I can work too much, you know, I can exercise too much at times. I can probably procrastinate too much as well, right? But I can become very, very obsessive about things. One thing that I'm aware of that just seems, in my experience, to be very common among people who've suffered from addictions and from alcoholism is this kind of obsessiveness of mind. You know, some say overthinking. Yeah, I think a lot about a lot, right? I think about, I dissect everything, and I can go over things and if what happens if I allow that to pull me in the direction of not being present in my relationships, those relationships that are important to me, or doing the things that really, really matter to me, then there's a problem. If it's taking me away from my values, what matters, then there's a problem. If I'm investing my time doing things, even if it's kind of unbalanced, you know, if I'm living my life in an unbalanced way, being addicted to spending time with my wonderful fiance, my son, and my friends, is that such a bad thing? I mean, it could be if I don't pay any bills or do any of the admin that I need to attend to in my life, right? It could be a problem.
Yeah.
But chances are it's not. That's a good way to invest our time.
Yeah. It's definitely almost like a philosophical question. But I agree with you. Yeah, it's there are certain things that if you're obsessed about them, they have a positive impact on your life.
Yeah.
But the thing that you mentioned about being obsessive, I can definitely relate to this, and I also saw that in a lot of people that I read stories about their own addiction journey. One example that comes to my mind is Grant Cardone. He was addicted to drugs and alcohol for most of his youth, and he said that thanks to his obsessiveness about alcohol and drugs, he just flipped that towards being financially successul, which helped him out, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But he used the same obsessive mindset as he was doing with drugs and alcohol.
Well, there is a correlation, I believe, between addiction and successful entrepreneurship. And one of the things I choose to do now, my niche client group, if you like, is to work with male entrepreneurs who are struggling with addictive tendencies and, for the most part, alcohol as well. Although we often know that alcohol is there are cross addictions quite often.
Yeah.
Because you come across that time and time again. This stereotypical notion that the alcoholic is just this person who's, homeless, living on the streets or on Skid Row or whatever. That's just one, Now, maybe, somebody might get to such a rock bottom that they lose all of their money and end up in that way. But there are many highly, highly successful people out there, entrepreneurs and people who are materially wealthy, but they're also extremely gifted, who really struggle with addiction and have struggled, whether it's substance use or alcohol or process addictions, gambling addiction, sex addiction, whatever, adult media content or whatever. It's common. It's really, really common. And like you said, if you can learn to harness that, if you can learn to flip that in some way and turn it towards something that's positive, but something that's really aspirational as well, then of course, what is the problem in that? What is it? And if that's the way that you want to live, then go for it. So I believe there is a way to be kind of positively addicted to things that are in line with your values, if you like. And invariably, that means getting away from the stuff that's causing damage to you and to other people. Whether that's damage to yourself internally, because it's a chemical addiction, right? Or it's the things that you're doing. It's the go-to behaviors, the processes, the behaviors that you're doing that are affecting you and others so badly. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with being obsessive about the things that make you happy and can bring about happiness for others. And for me, that's about creation. That's a creative process quite often. Often people are actually creative without knowing it.
Yeah.
Like they have this creative strength, if you like, but they don't recognize that because they just think they're doing hard line, I'm setting up a business or whatever. Essentially, it's actually a pretty creative endeavor.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that pattern, like you mentioned in your clients, successful entrepreneurs, super highly successful in the outer world, let's say, but kind of rotting inside.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting to see because I feel like the more I'm learning about myself, I'm realizing that I have a lot of childhood trauma, and I feel like we all do. And I do also feel like that the same trauma that motivated me to drink and towards my other addictive tendencies is now also motivating me to become a better version of myself, to be financially successful, to build up a business, etc. But it's like a same drive. It's very weird.
I think as long as we don't lose sight of why we're doing these things, if you have a greater purpose, if your purpose is just to make a lot of money and make it however you make it, I just want to make money or I just want to be famous for the sake of being famous. I think you've lost sight of what matters there, or you need to do some work around values there. But actually, if you say, I want I really want to help people, or I really want to inspire people, or I really want to entertain people in this way, or I want to find a solution to that problem. And as a consequence of that, I would like to live a prosperous, abundant life. That's not a problem. That's a really good thing. Because that abundance and prosperity is going to help you to do things that you couldn't do otherwise. It gives you the freedom and the power to do that. Yeah. Now, on the trauma issue there, I believe that trauma is a big part of addiction. I don't believe it's the only pathway to addiction. But I think it's always in there. It's always in the mix for me. And Gabor Mate has become quite famed for talking and writing about that in recent times, of drawing this link between childhood trauma and addiction. And I'm glad that he speaks so openly and fervently about this. Because I believe it often gets neglected, even among kind of more sort of spiritually based approaches. They often don't touch on the fact that a lot of addicts and alcoholics have had childhood trauma, and we talk about this spiritual problem, a spiritual malady. Yeah, it's probably also a problem of adjustment to childhood trauma and adversity, and very unfavorable family experiences at an early age as well. Yeah. So I think that often gets missed. I think that people often do need to do trauma work as part of their recovery, whether that is in therapy or whether it goes beyond therapy. Because what we now know is that the successful recovery from trauma, if you like, it's not just about sitting in a room with somebody and working with a therapist. That can be helpful, and we have all sorts of therapeutic approaches that are really helpful. I believe that's one of the areas in which psychotherapy and psychology has really made huge advances in recent years. But we also know there are other really important things. So, for example, people who've had childhood trauma, that they benefit from getting into the body, getting out of the higher cortical regions of the brain and into the body in a soothing way. Yeah. So we know the biology of this is that we know we need to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. We need to activate the vagus nerve in a way that allows us to feel safe, connected to others, and I believe connected to our own body, our environment, connected to nature, if you like, or the universe. Yeah. It goes beyond techniques to just help you to get over something that you went through in childhood. You've got to live different and show up different as a way of allowing that recovery from trauma to unfold in your life. That's my understanding of it. That's what I've come to, and that's through lived experience. That's not just through reading lots of stuff on trauma and being a therapist.
Interesting. Do you have any regrets when it comes to your drinking?
It's a good question. Look, there are always things that if I were able to go back and not do them or do them differently, then for sure I would. Yeah. But I know that's completely impossible. So therefore it's kind of, it's so irrelevant for me to think about that as a regret. Yeah, I believe that I did not show up for my son in a way that he deserved in his early years because I was sick and suffering and struggling and I didn't know any better. Mm-hmm. I regret some of the things I said to him. I regret some of the times that I wasn't there for him and that I neglected him. I also regret the way that I treated my ex-wife at times and the way that I treated other people, family members, and pushed them away. And I regret the fact that I could not find a better, more compassionate way to deal with my struggles, with my frustration, with my anger at times. But I don't feel the need to dwell on those things because they've gone. They are things in the past that I have no control over now. And at that time, I could not do any differently, clearly, because I didn't. But all I can do now is aim to do better, is be sorry for the mistakes that I made in the past and aim to do better now in my life. And part of my recovery from alcoholism and addiction is about that, is about showing up each day, trying to do better. Not being perfect, but making progress. Progress over perfection every time.
Yeah, it's a good point, I would say, because dwelling on regrets definitely doesn't lead to anywhere. Even though I do feel like that sometimes, I don't know if this is my subconscious, I will get some old memories from what I did, maybe in my dreams, about the things that I'm really not proud of when I was still drinking. And I do feel like that maybe this is how my subconscious is helping me to stay on track right now, to not go back to my old patterns.
I think we all have those moments, you know, and those are helpful in a way because they help you to pull you back to the way that you want to live now.
Yeah.
And one of the things about, 12-step fellowship work is that a part of the recovery process is about taking inventory of things that you did in the past or things that you're still hanging on to. And another part of the process is about making amends or being willing to make amends for the things that you did if they harmed others, if they harmed or wronged others in the past. And if you can make those amends, go ahead and make them. If you can't, you are willing to make them, and maybe the opportunity isn't there. And there are different types of amends. You can make a direct amends where you actually ideally go and speak to the person, or you can make living amends, the way that you show up differently and with intent to commit towards correcting the mistakes that you made in the past. You can't change them, but take corrective action now and be committed to that. For me, that's been really helpful. That's been really helpful because I can't change what happened then, but I can change how I show up today and what I do moving forward. And some of the things, some of the people that maybe we wronged in the past or we upset, they've moved on. We've moved on. They've moved on. Yeah. The number of times I've heard people say, I went to apologize or I went to make an amends to that person. I hunted them down. I had to find them, I went and said, I'm really sorry for this time that, I really offended you, or I screwed you over, and a person says, I don't remember that. So maybe some of it is in our minds, but it's not,
It's not almost real anymore.
Yeah. We elaborate on things, don't we? That's one of the obsessive things about thinking. I think that's really common among people who have problems with addiction, is that we can elaborate, we can catastrophize, we can magnify things, whether that is the past or the hypothetical future.
Yeah, indeed.
And one of the really important things I've learned in recovery is about bringing that awareness to the present, actually to the present.
Yeah.
Because the past is gone. We don't know what the future holds. It's completely hypothetical.
Do you do any daily practice that helps you that?
Yeah. So it has to be like embodied practice, and it has to be, a felt sense of it, not just like, I've read about this in a book, so therefore I'm going to do it. So, for me, it fits my routine. So I meditate each day, and I use mindfulness. So that's present moment awareness. I spend a lot of time in silence. I pray in my own way. I exercise, and I try and exercise in a very mindful, sort of present way. Do a lot of visualization about how I want to show up today, tomorrow, next week, whatever, about the kind of things I want my life to stand for. So visualizing and taking time to do that. a whole lot of things, a lot of techniques and methods to do with breathing and the breath and different ways of manipulating the breath and using soothing rhythm breathing and boxed breathing and different variations on breathing exercises. But a lot of practices that help me to move away from being caught up in my obsessive mind, to disidentify with my thoughts and feelings, and ground myself, and then think, right, how do I want to show up today? What do I need? What do I need to do today? What do I need to attend to today?
Yeah. Do you struggle with self-sabotage? Because I feel like that was really one big part of me when I was still drinking. Look, I'm not going to drink today. And then the evening comes and I'm drinking again. Yeah. And I felt like I was self-sabotaging on a daily basis. But when I stopped drinking, again, I thought I was a smart ass. And I was like, I don't do self-sabotage anymore. I'm like a perfect human being. But that is actually not the case.
Yeah. The way I look at that now is when I would always say to myself, I'm not drinking anymore. I had too much to drink last night. I'm not going to take a drink tonight. Yeah. And then invariably I would go to work and then come back and go to the fridge and take that drink, right? Or go to a bar, right? I don't look at that as self-sabotage. I look at that as part of the addiction. That was part of what I couldn't control. I was so caught up in that. When I learned to be powerless, that was when I had a choice, and that was when I could release myself from that. I don't look at that as self-sabotage. I look at that as just that's just self-will run riot and being caught up in addiction, right? So now I tend not to have that problem because I don't pick up that drink. That went a long time ago. I have to now manage life on life's terms without drinking alcohol and without engaging in some of the other addictive behaviors that I used to engage in, like that would mainly be about people and contacting people inappropriately and sending messages or disappearing on the internet and things like that. I live in different ways now, but I have to be aware of myself to do that. I mean, we can all self-sabotage if we're not aware of ourselves, right? And we can all self-sabotage in the moment, because the reality is we're not always aware of ourselves. If you've ever had a moment in time where you've said the wrong thing or you've lost your temper with somebody, what happened is that what you did was impulsive. It was beyond your volitional control. So that your self-awareness was overrode, if you like, by your tendency to just say what was on your mind or express your frustration, and therefore you can catch yourself and say, I shouldn't have done that. I'll seek to do better next time. You can only do that by being self-aware and monitoring yourself and taking inventory. So what I find really helpful is taking inventory of myself each day, which is part of my program as well. Helps me to become aware of myself. What did I do? What went well today? What didn't go so well? What were the conversations I had with people that didn't go so well? Where was I irritable with somebody today? Where was I maybe selfish in my agenda? Where did I want to get my way? But I didn't listen to that person or try to empathize with their point of view. That demands awareness. It also demands the commitment to looking back on your day and saying what went well today and what didn't go well. And it also demands rigorous honesty as well, which is another really, really important part of recovery for me, and an important part of living my life in a new way. Not drinking alcohol and getting caught up in other addictive tendencies is being rigorously honest with myself, and ideally with other people as well who I trust, who I can go to and say, I did this today. I'm not happy about it. What do you think about it?
Yeah,
that
that's
often
a brave
is enough
thing to do.
Yeah, but it's often enough as well to diffuse from it. Like, people will say, can you do anything about it now? Well, maybe I could go back and apologize to that person. Why don't you go do that at your next available opportunity? Okay. You should. Okay, I'll do it then. And that's how we come to live differently, right? It's my design for living now. Again, progress, not perfection. I'm not saying I'm perfect at this because I do the wrong thing at times. I say the wrong thing. I can be impulsive. I can be self-centered. I can be preoccupied. I can be irritable. But when I set out with the intention of trying to work on this stuff and correct the wrongs that I make, I show up in a new way. And I don't have to resort to picking up a drink.
Yeah. So, David, for anyone that's interested in your recovery coaching, where can anyone find you?
Yeah, so I now focus my efforts mainly on recovery coaching, and I mainly I work with men, and mainly men who are high performing, entrepreneurial, and are struggling with alcohol. There may be other addictions as well, but struggling, with alcohol and those things. I have moved. I still do some clinical work, but I've moved much more into the coaching space now. So I run online coaching programs as well as doing some face-to-face, in-person work. My brand is The Sober Way. So Dr. David Lee, The Sober Way. I can be found online, Facebook, Instagram at The Sober Way Coach.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really
pleasure.
appreciate it. I think the audience will be able to learn many insightful thoughts about your experience. And I wish you all the best when it comes to your coaching. Ben. And I'm sure we'll reconnect very soon.
Thanks for having me, Ben, and thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Take care.